Explore the depth of existentialism, a philosophy seeking meaning in human existence and the choices defining our lives. Existentialism, what does it mean to exist? Have you ever paused, looked around and thought, is this all there is? Or maybe you've wondered, what's the point of it all? Well, you're not alone. These kinds of questions are at the very heart of existentialism, one of the most intriguing and challenging schools of thought in philosophy. But before we dive into what it means to truly exist, we need to go back, way back to the roots of existentialism. You might not know it, but the father of existentialism is a man named Søren Kierkegaard. Now, I know we've already done a whole video on him, so don't worry. I won't go too deep here, and of course you can go to watch that video, which I really recommend for you. But it's important to know that Kierkegaard kicked things off by asking the big questions about anxiety, freedom, and faith. He was the first to explore what it really means to live authentically in the face of an uncertain, sometimes even absurd world. Kierkegaard's idea of the leap of faith is where existentialism really begins. He thought that in order to live fully, we need to face the leap, to make choices that reflect our true selves, even in the face of doubt. And he did all this in the context of Christianity, claiming that faith requires an acceptance of uncertainty. But let's fast forward, because many more existentialists after him took his ideas and ran with them in new and fascinating directions. Enter Jean-Paul Sartre, one of the most well-known existentialists. Sartre was all about freedom, radical freedom. According to him, existence precedes essence. What that means is simple. You are not born with a purpose. There's no owner's manual to life. You have to create your own meaning by the choices you make. Think of it like this. When you're born, you're like a blank canvas. The world doesn't come with a predefined script of who you're supposed to be. You write your own story, moment by moment. And this is both terrifying and empowering, because if you create your own meaning, you're also responsible for it. There's no one else to blame. You can't point the finger at your family, your circumstances, or fate. And that's where Sartre's famous phrase comes in, "We are condemned to be free." It might sound like a paradox, but it means that with this freedom to choose comes the responsibility to face the consequences of your choices with no excuses. But here's the thing, Sartre isn't the only existentialist we need to talk about. Let's move on to Albert Camus, who took a slightly different route. Camus agreed with Sartre that life has no inherent meaning, but instead of diving headfirst into radical freedom, he focused on the absurdity of existence. He famously said, "Life is like a Sisyphean task." Imagine this. You're stuck in a cycle of repetitive, pointless actions, like Sisyphus, rolling a boulder up a hill only to watch it roll back down again. That's life, according to Camus. It's absurd. We search for meaning, but the universe offers us none. Now, Camus doesn't suggest we give up and resign ourselves to despair. No, he encourages us to embrace the absurd and keep going anyway. He says, the struggle itself towards the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. In short, life is absurd, but we can still find joy in living fully, even without meaning. In other words, Camus said that life is absurd because we search for meaning in a world that doesn't offer any inherent meaning. But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of giving up, Camus embraced the absurd. He argued that by acknowledging that life has no ultimate purpose, we are free to create our own meaning. It's like saying, yeah, life's hard, but I'm going to enjoy the ride anyway. What Camus suggests is that you can still live fully and passionately, even knowing that life might be a bit of a cosmic joke. You create meaning, not by following some divine blueprint, but by embracing the here and now. Now, if we're talking about existentialism, we can't forget about Simone de Beauvoir, a groundbreaking feminist philosopher. She built on Sartre's ideas, but applied them to the question of gender. In her work, The Second Sex, she famously said, "One is not born, but rather becomes a woman." De Beauvoir argued that we're not born with a predefined gender. Instead, society imposes these roles on us. Just like Sartre's idea that existence precedes essence, she believed that gender identity isn't something innate, but something we create through our actions. But there's also a darker side. She showed how women have historically been defined as the other, treated as secondary to men. This makes the freedom to create one's identity incredibly difficult, especially for women who are confined by societal expectations. So, for de Beauvoir, true freedom is about breaking away from these imposed identities and defining yourself authentically, outside the constraints of society. But existentialism isn't just about individuals struggling with their own freedom. Martin Heidegger, a German philosopher, thought that understanding being itself was crucial. For Heidegger, the central question of philosophy is, what does it mean to be? But he didn't just want to answer this with abstract theory. No, Heidegger believed that we must live authentically by confronting our own mortality, our being toward death. What does that mean? Well, simply put, Heidegger says that we truly begin to live when we accept the fact that we'll die one day. By acknowledging this, we're forced to stop avoiding our reality, to stop hiding behind distractions, and to live with purpose. Death isn't something to fear, but rather something that can give life meaning. And then there's Franz Kafka, whose works like The Trial show us the absurd, often nightmarish nature of existence. Kafka's characters often find themselves trapped in oppressive bureaucracies or confusing situations that seem to have no meaning or logic at all. In a way, Kafka's world mirrors the existentialist idea that life can be unpredictable and full of irrational forces that we can't always understand or control. So, let's take a step back. What do all these thinkers have in common? Existentialism is, in many ways, a philosophy of freedom and responsibility. It's about understanding that you are in charge of giving your life meaning. There's no grand blueprint for your existence. You're free to choose, to act, and to define who you are. But with that freedom comes the weight of responsibility. It's also about facing the absurd, embracing the uncertainty and contradictions of life without running from them. Whether it's Sartre's radical freedom, Camus' acceptance of absurdity, or de Beauvoir's challenge to societal roles, existentialism tells us that we must be true to ourselves, even in a world that may not make sense. But here's the burning question. What does this all mean for you? How do you live authentically in a world that constantly pressures you to conform? How do you create meaning when everything feels so meaningless? Existentialism doesn't provide easy answers. In fact, it might leave you with even more questions. But in that uncertainty, you have the power to create your own path. The freedom is yours. So what do you think? Do you embrace your freedom and responsibility, or do you shy away from the chaos of existence? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if you found it helpful, or if it made you question everything about your life. Until next time, keep thinking, keep questioning, and remember, you exist. Make it count.